Hello, this is Japanese Economic Review Channel. So, if you felt your wallet getting a little bit lighter over the past year, well, it turns out you weren't just imagining it. Today, we are going to dive into the official inflation numbers for Japan for the year 2025. We'll look at exactly how much the cost of living went up, and maybe more importantly, why. All right, let's get right into it. So, let's start with the big question, the one that's probably on everyone's mind. Just how much more expensive did things actually get? This single number, it affects everything from your weekly grocery bill to your long-term savings plan. And based on the official statistics released by the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, the answer is, there it is, 3.2%. That's the headline number. For the full year of 2025, the overall consumer price index, and that's the big one that measures the average change in prices for pretty much all goods and services, it rose by 3.2% compared to the year before. So that is the official measure of inflation. But, a number like 3.2% doesn't really tell the whole story on its own. Is that a big deal? Is it not? To answer that, we've got to zoom out a bit and take a look at the trend over the last few years. Now, what's really fascinating here is the story this graph tells. It shows the year-on-year change in consumer prices, and you can see it plain as day. For years, Japan had this long stretch of price stability, even deflation sometimes. But then, look at that recent spike. Our 3.2% for 2025 is part of this massive surge in inflation, a trend we really haven't seen in decades. So this is definitely not a one-off event. It's part of a major economic shift. So to get an even clearer picture of what's going on, economists don't just stop at that one big number. They actually peel back the layers of the data using what are called core indices to really understand the underlying trends. First up, we've got the number we've already seen, that 3.2% headline CPI. You can think of this as the master number, right? It includes pretty much everything an average household buys. Next, analysts look at something called core CPI. Now, this one came in just a little lower, at 3.1%. It's basically the same as the main index, but with one key difference. It takes out fresh food. Now, why would they do that? Well, because things like fish and vegetables can have these wild price swings just because of weather or a bad harvest. So by removing them, you get a much clearer, more stable picture of the underlying inflation pressure in the economy. And then we can go one step further to what's called core CPI, which was 3.0%. This index removes both fresh food and energy prices. And that's because global oil prices can cause huge swings in what you pay for gasoline and electricity. So this measure is really considered the best indicator of the most fundamental, persistent price trends that are driven by the domestic economy itself. Okay, so we've got these different indices, and they're all kind of hovering around that 3% mark. But what does that actually mean for your wallet? Let's break it down and see exactly where these price increases came from and how they all added up to that 3.2% number. This chart tells the real story of 2025. Just look at that first bar. Of the total 3.2% inflation, food alone was responsible for a massive 1.94 percentage points of it. That means more than half, way more than half, of the price hikes people felt last year came directly from their grocery bills. And when you tack on transportation and utilities, yeah, it's clear. The biggest pinch was on the absolute necessities of everyday life. And just how much did food prices go up overall? Well, the food category as a whole saw a year-over-year price increase of a staggering 6.8%. I mean, that's the average across all food items, and that is a huge, huge jump. Okay, so now let's get even more specific. If the average food price went up by 6.8%, which items in your actual shopping cart were the biggest culprits? When we dig into the food category, some of these numbers are just wild. Grains led the pack with a nearly 22% price hike. Wow. But it wasn't just the staples. Even the small pleasures got more expensive. You can see snacks and drinks were up around 8 or 9%. And even grabbing a quick prepared meal from the convenience store cost almost 6% more. And to give you the single most powerful example from the official data, this is from inside that grains category. The price of standard non-koshikari brand rice. It jumped by an incredible 67.2%. That's just a massive increase on a core staple food item for so many people. But the increases weren't just in rice, not by a long shot. Let's look at some other specific everyday items. Chocolate prices were up over 35%, and coffee beans by nearly 40%. And a convenience store staple, onigiri, jumped almost 16%.
And it went beyond food, too. Electricity bills climbed over 5%, and hotel charges went up by nearly 7%.
But, it is important to point out that not absolutely everything went up. This slide gives us a more balanced view. So while essentials like food, fuel, and transportation all saw these big increases, there was one major category that actually saw a price decrease: education. Costs there fell by 4.5%. And this was driven almost entirely by a massive 71.1% drop in public high school tuition fees, which definitely provided some relief to eligible families.
So, after digging through all this official data, what's the real takeaway from the 2025 Consumer Price Index? What's the bottom line here?
Well, I think the story of 2025 inflation is actually pretty simple. It was an inflation of necessities. The biggest price hikes weren't on luxury items. They were on the food we put in our kitchens and the fuel for our cars. This wasn't some abstract economic number. It was a real, tangible squeeze on household budgets all across Japan.
And that really leaves us with the big question for the year ahead, doesn't it? Is this pressure on our grocery bills going to ease up, or are these higher prices the new normal? These are the trends we are definitely going to be watching closely. Thank you for watching the Japanese Economic Review. We look forward to having you with us again.